Welcome to Talk to Connect, the podcast where we explore how to have transformative engagement to create stronger personal and professional relationships. I created this podcast because connection with others has become more difficult in this time of heavy social media, differing viewpoints, and increased anxiety in the world. I'm your host, Michelle Franklin, so let's talk to connect. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to have a wonderful person, superstar, badass on this episode of Talk to Connect, Jacquie Marroquin. She's a consultant, writer, and truth teller. She helps nonprofits and government agencies and social justice organizations align their values with their actions. She has over 20 years of experience in the fields of domestic and sexual violence. She specializes in turning complexity into clarity. And don't we love that on Talk to Connect? Through strategic planning, compliance consulting, policy advocacy, and transformative leadership development. Her work is deeply rooted in justice, and it's guided by spirit, fueled by a deep commitment to transparency, accountability, and healing. And that's definitely something that we need much more of in this world. And Jacquie partners with leaders ready to do the real work, that uncomfortable, necessary, liberating work of building cultures that are safer, more honest, and actually worth staying in. So whether she's facilitating a training, rewriting a policy, or just holding space for hard truths, Jacquie shows up to help people and organizations evolve with integrity. And she's someone that I've known for a decade now. Wow, that's a minute. And my former boss. I'd like to bring to you Jacquie Marroquin. Hi, Jacquie. How are you doing today?
Hello, Michelle. I am doing wonderful, particularly because I get to hang out with you.
I know, right? How cool is this? I know we saw each other a few months ago, but each and every time we get to spend time together, Jacquie, it's almost like it's the first because we just have so much to say to each other. I don't know if you feel the same way.
I do. We never have enough time.
Never. Well, I am so glad that we're taking this time now. And I really just wanted Jacquie to take a moment to say that ever since I met you, I have always appreciated just the passion, purpose, and just the spirit and energy that you bring to the work that you do, and when I found out, I think it was on, maybe it was on Facebook that you had launched a Substack, I had to talk with you about it. So can you just share with the audience the name of your Substack and what it's about and your why behind starting it?
Yeah, my Substack is a new venture for me. It's me stepping way out of my comfort zone to actually share a lot of what I have been thinking about in the last about 4 years or so. Mm-hmm. I left the domestic violence field in 2022. And since I have been thinking about writing and creating this idea of what does a leader actually need in order to be a leader who leads with integrity. And this is part of what I'm doing. I've been writing a book about how a leader in the domestic violence and sexual violence field can continue to lead without losing their souls, and also how to get your soul back if you do feel like you have lost your soul. And so this is all in a way for me to be able to write the book and have the conversations that I wish I could have had 10, 15 years ago in my leadership journey. Right. That is why I am doing this work.
Oh my goodness, right? Because you've been in the field for a minute now, right? Like it's over 20 years. So I'm sure you've seen a lot, you've experienced a lot. So are you using that, I would assume, to actually inform like the why and the what and the impact behind what you're doing?
Yes. Everything that I'm writing about is specifically because I've experienced these things. And I have not only did I experience them, I was a leader with varying levels of success and failure. And for me, in the last 4 years, I have really dug deep in terms of not just what happened in terms of the way that I led, but also what were the things that influenced my type of leadership, and also to really uncover what are the ways in which I can then support leaders who are in the field who are feeling kind of lost. I felt lost for a very long time. And the the way that I learned how to lead in these fields, the way that I learned how to lead actually created some really bad habits that not only I developed, but I also learned. And so my work in the last few years has been to uncover what those bad habits have been and to reclaim the way that leadership works and reclaim what it means to actually be a person with power and authority in organizations, particularly because so much of my frustration with the field that comes from like a couple of decades of doing this work is that in the field, we talk a lot about these systems and how these systems that are outside of ourselves are creating the problems that we are trying to solve. And I want to say to every single person who is in a leadership position in the domestic violence and sexual violence field, what I want to say is this, and I'm going to hold your hand while I say it. We are the system. If you are in a position of leadership, particularly senior leadership in these fields, let me hold your hand and very lovingly tell you, my loves, we are the system. We are the grown-ups in the room. And in my experience, I never learned how to really hone my own power and authority within these leadership structures in order for me to actually do the work with the integrity that I wanted to bring. And so these are the lessons that I am now hoping to be able to share with everyone who is actually doing the work still.
Wow, that is so powerful. And I appreciate the extension of the love of holding the hand, because I think so often as leaders, we think we have all the answers, that we don't need any support, we don't need any guidance. And that's when we actually do our worst and show up as our worst selves, not getting that support and guidance. So thank you for that. I did want to ask you, in terms of your writings and materials, one of the things that I've seen is you mentioning about leadership not being neutral. So what do you mean by that?
So to me, when I say leadership is not neutral, I mean that every decision that that a person in a place of leadership makes, or importantly, that they avoid, shapes someone's daily lived experience at work. People who are in leadership positions don't actually understand that they are responsible for the psychological safety of the people who are around them.
Right.
So when a leader is silent, that shapes the culture. When a leader delays decisions, that also shapes the culture. So what we normalize as leaders, whether it's positive, negative, or even something that we feel is quote unquote neutral, shapes the culture of the people who work with us. So this is the way that I learned leadership. I learned that leadership is usually being neutral. And being neutral means being fair or being professional. The professionalization of our field means that we are neutral in a lot of the ways in which we do our work. And I'm not talking about the big picture work. I'm not talking about being neutral in a time when being neutral means you're siding with the oppressor. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about neutrality in the moment by moment decisions that a leader makes every day. The reality is when we as leaders feel that we are being neutral, that actually protects the person with the most power in the room. Neutrality protects the person with the most power in the room. So if an organization experiences harm or burnout, or there's a overall confusion happening in the organization, this is happening under your leadership. Even if it's unintentional, you're still influencing it. You may not have created the systems that you are working in, but you are definitely participating in how it all plays out. Right. So to me, leadership is not about the intention, it's about the impact. And every decision that a leader makes either reproduces harm or interrupts it.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. That's the protecting in the room by being neutral. Like it's the elephant, right, that we're acting like isn't there, and not holding people accountable and actions accountable. Love right. that. And when you mention about fractal leadership, what are you referencing there?
And you and I might have had these discussions when we worked together before, Michelle, but I was obsessed with fractals for a while. And fractals are things that are patterns that repeat at every scale. So whether you zoom in or you zoom out, the structure of what you're looking at looks exactly the same. And so the best example that I have is like this really fancy broccoli that you look at, the really fancy broccoli, and no matter what you look at, what angle you look at it, it looks exactly the same. So that's what fractals are. It's a pattern that repeats itself at every single scale. So I believe that leadership works like fractals. So in my opinion, how you handle conflict personally is how conflict gets handled in your organization. How you relate to money personally is how scarcity or abundance ends up showing up on your team. And how you treat your own exhaustion often becomes how burnout is normalized within an organization. Because regardless of your intention, it is your actions that people are looking at. And therefore, that is the leadership that you are demonstrating by your actions. So if there's something that feels broken in an organization, it's usually because that same pattern is being practiced quietly at the center or at the top of the organization. So fractal leadership actually helps leaders look at the small, tiny, minute by minute patterns instead of blaming the whole system. And that is what I think brings the power back online for leaders who are feeling like, I don't even know what I'm doing here anymore. Mm-hmm. So instead of blaming the entire system, this is us reclaiming our power within these systems that are harmful, and also where we still have a lot of power within these systems. Because again, if you're a senior leader in an organization, you are a part of the system. And if you are a part of the system, you can change that system by changing what you do on a day-to-day, moment-by-moment basis.
Got it. Okay. And so you mentioned leadership, taking responsibility. You mentioned broken organizations. So how do you balance broken systems and broken organizations with leader responsibility?
Yeah, this is where I feel like it's both. So there is a way to be able to balance both of those things. That old habit that I learned was thinking about the system as so external and so far away, so far removed from my own power and my ability to make some changes that I felt powerless. And I felt like, well, what am I doing here then? So this is how I think about balancing broken systems with leader responsibility. The systems we operate in, so all of the funding structures, the politics, particularly in these times, all of these like compliance requirements and all of these administrative things that happen in an organization are all real. And they're often deeply flawed. They constrain us. We have known this for decades. People have been talking about how these systems are not working for us, and we've been talking about it for decades. This is the part where I'm going to hold everyone's hand. These systems do not absolve us. Systems limit options, but they do not eliminate our integrity. So a leader can still choose how honest they are, how they communicate these constraints, how they prioritize people and the dignity of people, and what they normalize, and this is the important part, what they normalize under pressure. So when leaders say, there's nothing I can do about this, it is often a way to psychologically exit responsibility. And that's where the culture starts to erode. So I'm not ignoring the systems. I'm just refusing to let them continue to be an excuse to not regain and take back our power as leaders and use the power and authority that we do have to do that which we envision in our minds to do with that kind of power.
Okay. And I see that in terms of what you're sharing, you're talking about we are the system, we are the people. And we have a choice within that to either succumb to what we think are external pressures, or internally in our core, how do we show up to then impact that system? Is that what I'm hearing you discuss with us?
Yes, because part of what happens within a system is that a system is not this amorphous, thing that is so far removed from us that we can't touch it. A system is simply made up of people doing things within a system, people creating, systems and putting systems in place. Oppression is not something that happens outside of, you need a human being to be oppressive to someone else in order for oppression to exist, right? You need the policies that are being created that are oppressive to people. And so when we as leaders see ourselves far removed from that system, then we feel like we can't actually impact and change anything. When the reality is, because systems are made up of people, then if you change the people, then you change the system.
Right. Okay. And so with that, what would you say that real accountability looks like with these leaders who are wanting to stand up and say, I have power, I have agency, I have impact, I can make a difference regardless of the system that's in place, especially with the various things going on now in different workforce industries. What does real accountability look like?
I think this is one of those discussions that I have been wanting to have for a really long time about the idea that accountability is actually different from punishment. Punishment is loud. Punishment is visible and often really satisfying. We see that all over now about the idea that people who cause harm need to be punished. And the reason why they need to be punished is because they're not taking accountability for the harm that they have done. So to me, for a leader to be an accountable leader, to really take accountability for not only the good stuff that they do, but also the harm that they have probably very intentionally caused, but the harm is still there. That accountability sounds like, oh, I actually made that decision, and this is the impact of that decision. Mm-hmm. And not only am I recognizing that I made that decision and this is the impact, but here's what I am now doing differently to not continue to have that impact. Now, this is also really important. It doesn't mean being an accountable leader and being able to hear from the people that you are leading doesn't mean everyone gets what they want. Because being heard is very different from being obeyed. So being heard does not necessarily mean that you're going to get what you want. But the leader needs to be in a position to be able to hear anything, to hear exactly what it is that people want, and then making a decision. So but accountability, in order for someone to be accountable, it requires ownership. Mm-hmm. What I have seen, unfortunately, and I have personally experienced, is that accountability now becomes a spectacle. And accountability means I'm going to come at you and I'm going to shame you for the choices that you have made because I did not agree with them. Now, the choices that were made may have been bad choices, but the spectacle around holding someone else accountable does not work. Accountability has to come from the person who caused the harm themselves. And it requires leaders to tolerate the discomfort of being called out for whatever it is that they have done, even if they feel it's not true, without collapsing into defensiveness or shame. That is maturity.
Exactly. That takes a lot of maturity. And I don't know if we actually have enough of it, and unfortunately, in terms of our leaders. So what would you say in terms of a leader that actually is struggling to put their ego aside, not get defensive, be open, be present? What does that look like for a leader to have those internal resources, if you will, to accept what they're hearing?
There's been a lot of discussion around what a fully resourced leader looks like. And I really loved this thought about what does a fully resourced person need? Mm-hmm. Me, a fully resourced leader is not about money. Fully resourced leader is someone who has a healthy relationship with power, with money, and particularly with rest. Mm-hmm. So it is a leader that is not operating for martyrdom, right? They're not hiding behind scarcity as it is some sort of virtue. And I'm not only talking about scarcity in terms of money. I'm talking about scarcity in terms of time, in terms of how they take care of themselves and how they show up in the world. They're also not chasing abundance in a way that harms others. So a fully resourced leader understands that sustainability, clarity, and integrity are not luxuries and behaviors that you use when you are well rested. You've had all of your, you've had all of your meals, you're well rested, and you've had a really good week. It is really easy to show up clear and with integrity when those things happen. That is a prerequisite. It is a lot harder to do that when a leader is not well resourced, meaning they are burning candles. They're burning the candles at multiple ends. So the shift in order to become a fully resourced leader who can handle being told and being questioned is someone who does all of these things internally before it ever shows up in money, before it ever shows up in the resources, financial resource that comes through an organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know one of the things that I often talk to my team about is how I have to meditate. That's just one way of me just checking my ego, checking my spirit and my energy to make sure I'm grounded, to be able to receive the different, I always like to call them opportunities for growth. My team knows I say that often, the opportunities for growth that come my way as a leader, because it can be difficult.
It is difficult, and what makes it even more difficult is when we not only have we picked up on these really bad habits that we've learned throughout the years of being a leader, particularly in social justice nonprofit spaces, mm-hmm. but it is even more so when we are working under pressure. And the pressure in which nonprofits, social justice organizations, the domestic violence, sexual violence field is working in right now is so great that So many of us in leadership are literally like collapsing near the end of the day because truly we are literally just surviving the day. Mm-hmm. And when you are just surviving the day, your leadership is probably not showing up in the way that you think it is. The people around you, the people you supervise, the people you lead, the people around you, your own family, they're the ones who are watching you and they know what you're really struggling with. As much as you think you're hiding it from them, you are not. They know it. So my hope is that we can get to a place where leaders can be so well resourced that when they start to move away from their integrity and their leadership, that they are in a place where they can be told, hey, what you're doing is not what you say you are doing. This is who I know you to be. This is who you are now. Something is wrong here. But for many of us, particularly, and especially me, I experienced this as well, that when I was in a place of leader, as a senior leader, if somebody were to come and tell me you no longer seem like you're working within your integrity, I would have been so exhausted that I would not have heard it, and I did not hear it. In fact, I got defensive and I said, I'm just going to outperform everyone. But my performance was so taxed by the fact that I was so under-resourced, not because the work was too much, not because what was happening in the world was too much, but because of the choices, the moment-by-moment choices that I was making throughout the day were causing me to not be well resourced enough to be able to hear that feedback and be able to do something about it without becoming defensive or angry about it. That's the work that I want to do. That's the book that I would have wanted to read. And that is the kind of leadership that I would have liked to see.
Well, thank you, Jacquie, so much for doing this powerful, just not only self-reflection, but also the impact of your experience and putting it out there for people to learn from, to hear. I mean, to me, this applies to so many different industries. I know we've talked about the domestic and sexual violence field, and there are so many fields. There's higher education, mental health, like all of us can benefit from recognizing if we're being taking care of ourselves and resourcing ourselves to be a leader of impact and significance. And this has been a powerful conversation. And I just want to know, do you have maybe one item that you would like to leave our listeners with, or a message or a call to action, if you will?
Yeah, I think that we've been taught that leadership is about endurance, that it's about surviving the system, surviving the funding cycle, surviving the politics. But survival is not the same as integrity. So the question is not whether the system is broken. It is. We know it. The systems are breaking down as we speak. The question is, who are you becoming while you operate inside of these systems that are crumbling? Because the small patterns you practice under pressure become the culture everyone lives in. And if we want organizations that feel aligned, sustainable, and human, and that provide the dignity that everyone needs in order to do their best work, that work starts with leaders being willing to tell themselves the truth first. Not in a dramatic way, but in a responsible way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I so just appreciate the way that you brought tools and your lived experience and impact all together in this discussion. It's been really just grounding and inspiring for me as a leader. Still, in my development, every day I look to develop, and this conversation definitely has had impact. And you really remind us that it's about becoming our better selves and not about perfection, right? I think I also hear that in your conversation as well, that we don't have to be perfect.
We don't. The more perfect we are, the more performative we become. The realer we are, the more effective we are. So that's why I love to work with people who are ready to talk about that truth and ready to be honest about who they are and who they want to be.
Well, thank you so much for that, Jacquie. And can you share with our audience any social media handles or any way that they can follow you and your work?
You can follow me at Zuli Soul, at Zuli Soul on Instagram, and you can find my Substack as well under Jacquie Marroquin, and that's where you can find me.
Thank you so much, Jacquie. Well, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for this time and coming on the show. And I'm sure this has been a tremendous value for the audience. And I just want to thank you for all of the great work you have done, that you are doing. Thank you for listening to Talk to Connect. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to follow or subscribe to my podcast and share it with others. A new episode will drop the fourth Tuesday of every month. And if you have a question you'd like me to answer on a future episode, email me at michelle@letstalktoconnect.com. That's Michelle, spelled Michell. So that's 2 L's, no E on the end, at letstalktoconnect.com. So let's continue talking to connect and create transformation in our personal and professional relationships.